Good evening. It's another Monday night. Uh, Hell's Kitchen's on. Not very exciting this week. Uh, so I figured let me get some of these rants out of the way. And I really, I'm not building any viewership. So the people that watch, I want them to know a little more about me. And I've become very good friends with a lot of you. And I appreciate it and enjoy the company very much. So let me tell you some stuff about how the 60s were. 60s were not a very nice social time. There was incredible turmoil and incredible dissent and incredible protest against the absurdity of the war in Vietnam. And believe me, my heart goes out to every veteran of that war, because any war that's unnecessary and any person that is put through the hell that these people were put through, in some cases merely to keep Nixon reelected, and in other cases under the pretense of the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, when the Gulf of Tonkin incident never happened, is just a tragedy in the first degree. But what happened was that it was almost like us against them. It was almost like the students, no matter where, against the administration, against the government, and even against the police. It was almost us against them, and the way things were going. So things were in such a sad state around Miami that I felt that the students there were 17,000 students at the University of Miami, and each one paid a certain amount of their tuition went to what they called an activities fee, and the activities fee was usually set aside to bring some big bands on. Well, they turned to big bands, but they weren't big bands then. We brought up Janis Joplin and Joan Baez. That's an interesting story I can tell you about both of them. Uh, Canned Heat, Black Sabbath, the Doobie Brothers, Roberta Flack, just to mention a few groups, Santana, and this is regrettable. I should have dug my review I wrote for Santana after watching them, uh, but I'll dig that up sometime and throw it in. Uh, but there was a conflagration all the time between the police and normal students. So what I proposed was that they take $1, just a one-time event, from every student's activity fee, and they place it a in an escrow account for a bond fund, so that any student being arrested for a misdemeanor and a few crimes above a misdemeanor uh, could just show their student ID and be immediately bailed out, so they wouldn't have to go to a bail bondsman and lose the 10% of whatever the bail was and so forth. So I made that suggestion, and as I say, I will claim no thing that I can't document. And here's the that article there. Uh, Bond issue proposed by, and then I guess you can, I don't know if you can see where it says Rocky Waters, yada yada yada. But anyway, uh, the student activity committee thought it was a great idea, and they passed it, and every student's ID then became an automatic get out of jail free card. So I it didn't happen at Berkeley, and it didn't happen at Harvard, and it didn't happen through the STS, and it didn't happen at any place else. But it happened at the University of Miami, and it's to their credit that it did. Now, whether how long that continued after I left the campus, I have no idea. But as far as I know, that escrow account might still be in existence, because I really had never paid any attention to any college I ever went to once I left there, and I've been to colleges in Montana, Hawaii, Oregon, University of Bombay, University of New Delhi, and University of Miami. Now, something else that happened while I was there is the city, the greater city and county of uh, Miami passed an ordinance. The ordinance was called Ordinance 795, Law and Order of Miami. Uh, and what this ordinance said was that any use or desecration of the American flag was a criminal act, and it meant anything at all. So let me flip through here. I don't know if I can. Oh, so this student. Well, as soon as I saw the ordinance, I thought this is totally absurd and it's just a joke. But this student here ended up being arrested for having a decal of uh, a peace sign with a flag behind it on his motorcycle helmet. And this was the first arrest that took place. Well, prior to this, I had on my radio show. As a matter of fact, the first radio show I had was a talk show, and I invited Chief Garmeyer, who was the chief of police of the city of Miami. I invited him on the show and had him as my first guest. So he gave me his private phone number and told me if anything ever pops up to get in touch with him. So I thought, well, this is ridiculous. But the first thing I did is I called the American Civil Liberties Union, got them on the case. Then I went down to visit Garmeyer in his office down in City, Miami. And when I entered the room, I took with me maybe 4 or 5 magazines, and on the cover of one was the American flag, and it was draped over a table, and it had a shot glass on it and a couple other things, and it was obviously in violation of this ordinance. So I took these magazines down with me, and when I looked around the room here, Garmeyer had a beautiful big American flag behind him, but it had a fringe, you know how there's little gold tassels on it and all, sewed around the edge of the flag. And that itself was a violation of this ordinance. So I pointed it out to him, and I said that in order to prosecute this, you must prosecute it equally in all directions. You cannot just pick out people that you don't like. You can't pick out just the peace signs with the flags on them and not go after Time or Newsweek magazine. I forget which one had the cover. So I said that all these would have to be removed from every newsstand in the county, and that he would have to enforce this law. So before the meeting was over, he agreed not to enforce this law and arrest no one else until this one particular case worked its way up through the courts. And he kept his word, because I think he saw the absurdity of this, and it was obviously unconstitutional. That the Constitution says, in plain words, that we should have the right, if we want to burn the flag, to stomp on it, to spit on it, to do whatever you feel like doing with it, and that the Constitution stands behind your right to do that. Now, I've flown a flag upside down lots of times, and I have a sign on the front of my yard in which I talk about the criminal acts of Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and Gonzalez, and I have the flag flying upside down, painted upside down on my sign. But it's the right of everyone to do what they care with the flag. We don't fight for the flag, as all everybody keeps saying. It's not the case. We fight for the Constitution, and the Constitution stands behind your right to do what you want with a flag. Now I know I'm going to lose a lot of my fans in Texas, but this is the truth of the matter. So the American Civil Liberties Union took the case. They ended up in the Supreme Court of Florida, and even the Supreme Court of Florida had enough sense to throw the case out unanimously, and the ordinance was never used again. But it was very nice, and I was happy that this young man didn't have any further trouble. The American Civil Liberties Union certainly didn't charge him a nickel, and he was free to drive around with his helmet with a peace sticker on it. And one other interesting case. There was a man, I don't know if you're familiar with Coral Gables, but there's a place called Miracle Mile. And it's very exclusive, like Rodeo Drive shopping center. And there was an old grizzly guy walking down there with a beard and all. And the cops stopped him because they thought, well, it was bad for business. Can't have somebody like this walking the streets of Miracle Mile. And they asked him for his ID, and he said, in a free society, you don't need an ID, right? So they arrested him. So I picked up on that case and got in touch with the friend who was in American Civil Liberties Union lawyer in Miami, and they took that case too. And of course, that case was thrown out again. But that is no longer the case in this country. with the passing of the Patriot Act, habeas corpus is out the freaking window, and every other goddamn freedom we have is being stepped on. You can no longer be nobody in a society. You have to prove who you are, and that is just absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that Obama and his administration and the Justice Department would push and renew the Patriot Act is criminal in itself. So I want to thank you for your time. And I thought, oh, maybe that's an interesting little story. And the few fans that I do have, it gives them a little more insight into me. And I'll do a lot more of these rants. And you certainly can skip over them or watch them. But there are some interesting parts of my past. Thank you very much.